Welcome to the first of the podcasts for the 8th grade science class at Carroll Middle School. This podcast is going to be focusing on Chapter 5, getting you ready for the test that you have coming up on December 16th, 2011. That is this Friday. Taking a look at the first thing I want to talk about is how to actually use one of these guides. This is kind of a first for me to start doing these, and it should help you out quite a bit, hopefully. You want to definitely make sure you have your study guide out and follow along with me as I go through this. Play, pause, stop, rewind anytime you want to during this video. Use it to help quiz you and get ready for the quiz that we have coming up, or the test we have coming up. Watch it as many times as you want. Don't think of this as being something you can only watch one time. Use it as much as you need. The study guide does not have a due date on it, but if you want to do well on the quiz or tests that are coming up, you should have figured out by now. You should definitely take care of going through it. After you fill it out, it's actually a good idea to stay with your parents, a friend, anybody that can basically help read the questions to you or help read the concepts to you and have you tell them back to them and check your work. Now, if we take a look at it, we're going to start out with the vocab. Looking at Chapter 5, Section 1, the first vocab word I'm going to talk about is the water cycle. The water cycle is referring to water moving from Earth's surface to the atmosphere and back again. It's a continuous cycle going back and forth, and we actually see the water go up, comes back down in the form of precipitation, and becomes groundwater. It spends a lot of time in there. It can actually take quite a long time for it to go through, but in essence, all the water on Earth started out originally. Groundwater is referring to water found in the ground. It's a pretty obvious definition for it, pretty simple word. Evaporation is any liquid changing from a liquid to a gas. It involves just the surface of the liquid. Boiling is actually when it has more going on down below. But liquid changing to a gas one just gets enough energy to overcome the barrier and become that gaseous state. This is an important part of the water cycle. It helps to also go along with something called transpiration. It's kind of a cousin to evaporation because it does create water vapor in the air. But transpiration, though, is basically water given off from the leaves of a plant. When you see the word transpiration, I kind of like to think of the word perspiration or sweating. It's basically a leaf is sweating. If you wrap a leaf during the summer in a plastic bag and leave it there for a few hours, you actually see water droplets start to form inside of the bag. The next word is basically the opposite of this. It is precipitation. And that's just referring to any kind of water falling from the atmosphere to the earth. Doesn't make a difference what form it is in this. The book actually has a nice big long definition that includes all, the snow, sleet, rain, hail, all of those in there, but it's not necessary to think about that. As long as you understand it's water from the clouds or from the atmosphere, and it has to hit the Earth's surface. If it doesn't, it's called something different. And we'll talk about that once we come back from break and start talking about the weather. Looking at section 5.2, this one was focusing on how rivers and lakes work. The first word was a tributary, and this is referring to a stream or river that feeds a bigger river. Doesn't really have a definition as far as how big the river needs to be in either situation. It's just basically it feeds into something else. So it's giving water to another body of water, and they're all both going to be moving forms of water. A watershed is referring to all the area that feeds a river system. And so when we take a look at the watershed, we're referring to a larger area. It's all the land around it. For example, here in Fort Wayne, we're actually part of the Maumee Rivershed, or the Maumee Watershed. And it covers actually most of Allen County. Out around school, it might not be part of that, and that calls into a different watershed in that case. But a large part of Fort Wayne actually is considered part of that watershed, feeding into Lake Erie. A divide is actually a ridge that separates two watersheds. Now, for example, we're pretty close to the divide right here, but it's not really obvious because it's not a big ridge like we see out west. But for example, if you go out to the Rocky Mountains, let's say, you can see a much bigger divide out there. It's much more obvious that, hey, if I put water on one side or on the other, they're going to go in two opposite directions. Finally, we're talking about lakes. We have reservoirs, which is just a fancy term for a man-made lake, or a lake that exists in nature after somebody's built like a dam or some kind of an embankment to stop the river from flowing. And then we finally have eutrophication, which is just a buildup of nutrients in a lake. If you think about that example we did in class involving fish. If you want to tune back in for the second podcast, we'll go through the rest.